Okay, now we're going to work on the transaxle of the transmission. So we're going to take the tire off, which we already did. We got a 30mm socket, and I put that on here. Make sure the tire's on the ground. This has a lot of foot-pounds of torque. So we take this off. We're going to start taking the pieces of the front suspension apart so we can actually pull this out. This transaxle, you can see it right here. The boot going into the transmission. So we need to get that out of the transmission. So what we're going to do is we have to take the strut off. So we're going to do, we got the stabilizer arm here, got the bolt connecting to the strut there, and we got the tie rod we want to take off. And this whole assembly will pull down, we'll pull it down so it'll come out of this, the strut. So we can actually take that off. Once we have that loose, then what I'm going to do is bang on this to punch it out of this assembly so it becomes loose, so I can actually get it out from behind here to the side and then pull it out of the transmission. So that's the goal. Let's see how that works. There's also a great video on YouTube on doing an 02 Ford Taurus, taking this apart, so as a reference. One thing about taking the stabilizer bolt off is it's an 18mm, but usually when you take the nut off, all it does is just spin and spin and spin. So what you need to do is take an 8mm wrench, and this bolt, the stud is made for it. You put the 8mm wrench on, and that holds it while you go underneath and take the 18mm wrench on it to untighten that bolt right behind it. It's kind of funky, but that's what you got to do. Slow process. Make sure you put some stuff on your bolts, WD-40 or something, so it comes off easier. Okay, so what we're going to do, getting back to take the tie rod off, we're either going to use a pitman arm puller, or down here we could use a fork, stick it in right like this. But typically a fork might damage, there's a rubber gasket here, so you might cut that using a fork. So in this case, taking the pitman arm puller, just putting it right on like this, and taking a wrench and screwing it, and it'll pop right off just like that. We're also going to take off the caliper, the bolt, 15mm, there's 2 bolts. That'll actually take off the rotor as well, because when this drops down, the brake line hose right here, which goes back up to here, is not long enough. So we don't want to stress that out or possibly break that. So we need to take that off as well. Okay, so we took all the bolts out, support stabilizer, took the tie rod off with the pitman arm puller. We got the caliper tied up here so it just hangs, so it doesn't put stress on the hose. And what we did is we pushed this. As soon as I got this out, this came down, this was still attached, so it relieves any kind of play in between there. It allows more play in the gears in here and the gears up. You can't see right there, the gears in here. So I took a hammer and pounded on this side, right as it was sticking out over here. So that pushes it back, pushes it out of this channel, and it doesn't pound into the transmission. If these gears were tight and you pound it on this thing, you're going to pound it right into the transmission. You might damage that seal. So we don't want to do that. Even though we're taking the transmission out, Still didn't want to do that, so now this is out. You push this down as far as you can and you wiggle this out. Now it's out. Now we can pull it out of the transmission. You know, I'm going to put this back, put it into the strut so I can get the tire back on so it doesn't look like a project car sitting in my driveway. The neighbors will complain. Also, make sure when you pull out the transaxle you have a drip pan underneath, because transmission fluid is leaking out of the other side, and I'm sure it's a leak out of this side. So watch out for that.